Day, everyone, and welcome to the fourth installment of our Smart Series Cultural Webinar Series, Being LGBTQIA in America. Today's conversation is in the form of a fireside chat between Nathan Andres, coach and author of Your Real Life, and Ashley Brundage, author, founder, and president of Empowering Differences. To get us started, can you each share a little bit about yourselves and the work that you do, as well as a personal turning point that led you to becoming leaders and advocates in the LGBTQ plus space?
All right, well, I guess I'll get started. Hey, everyone, I'm Ashley Brundage. I'm the president and CEO of Empowering Differences, a leadership training and consulting organization. And I transitioned about 16, 17 years ago, or at least started, because it's a never-ending process, for those who don't know. That's why gender-affirming care is so important. And so I navigated a lot of barriers and obstacles, harassment, discrimination, and a year and a half of homelessness. I found employment in the banking industry as a part-time bank employee and worked my way up the HR ladder to leading a leadership development program for 60,000 employees. And now I run my own company. I'm an author, and I wear a lot of hats. My favorite hat is probably mom, to my two kids who are 18 and 20. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to have this conversation with you, Nathan.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to meet you, Ashley. And for our audience, we were talking behind the scenes in the green room a little bit to get to know each other. And I can't wait to get into the conversation further with you, Ashley. I'm Nate Andres. I am a coach and author. I wrote a best-selling book called Your Real Life, and it is really about using the power pack punch of what I call authentic resilience to get through all of life's really hard things and adversities and ultimately get to the other side of well-being and joy through that model. Worked in very similarly to Ashley, worked in and continue to work in HR across the world from Asia to North America, and have had tentacles and legs around Europe and the UK and Australia, New Zealand, and other places too. So know the business of people quite well. And a big part, here's the question, right, is, how did we start to get into this activism and or leaders in the LGBTQ space? And for me, that was really after having experienced going back into the closet when I worked in professional sports and coming out the other end after having realized that being stuck in the back of that closet no longer served me in the ways that were healthy for me. And that journey along the way has included many interesting curves and bumps and ups and downs. But one thing that I came out of that second time of coming out of the closet was really, I'm going to be authentic to myself. And how do I help other people, particularly as an HR person, in the business of people, to help them find themselves, their whole selves in workplaces. And to make a long story short, it was probably about 7 years ago or so, I really got ahead of the curve in terms of offering and thinking about how do we provide mental health and well-being at work, and creating workspaces that have um, mindful and intentional mental health practices as part of their work culture. And so for me, it was a burnout for myself in the hospital that forced me to really become more activist in the space of providing spaces and workplaces for employee mental health, but also importantly for our community. We were talking before, we constantly are coming out, and that can take
Sometimes 10 or 12 times a
times
day.
a day. Yeah. So it's really important, that we are playing in the space that is safe for everybody. I want to throw that same question over to you, Ashley. What was the turning point for you in finding this inner voice that is ultimately become advocating for our community?
Yeah, well, I guess it's a two-part answer as well, right? So it was first figuring out yourself, because with any leadership model that we help with HR people, we have to help them be grounded in themselves first. Because if you're not in that space, then you can't really help other people. And that's where I had to uncover that I needed to live my life authentically. And so I only had to come out of the closet once. So apparently, wait, I'm like ahead of the curve here. Uh, but it was interesting, and I was actually out kind of knocking doors trying to find employment, and I realized that I could get a job making $8 an hour, and but in that scenario, if I was going to get paid that amount, I might as well have just been comfortable into myself. And so that's how I actually started going to jobs presenting as Ashley, and it was like my way of coming out to see, test the waters with hiring individuals, and and so luckily for me, I found a place that was like, okay, sure, whatever. I mean, I mean, I made a lot of bold promises about the business community and why it was so important to have someone like me on the team. So that was kind of like the first part of that. And that's what led me into the banking industry because I worked as a banker and a business banker. And actually, I was one of the top revenue producers for the whole company for 3 straight years. So I delivered on my promise to bring the business by hiring someone like me in their organization. And then the second part was kind of when I realized that, oh wait, now maybe I'm in a much different situation. I'm not battling not having employment. I'm not battling not having access to healthcare resources because I
Mm,
had resources. I started getting very empowered. And so then I realized, wow, maybe there's other things I could be doing for other marginalized identity group communities. And I think that that's the genesis kind of how, hopefully how empowerment should be working for all of you who are watching the webinar or the recording is think about when you get in a position where you hold on to some sort of power or authority to make decisions for you or potentially make decisions for other people, this is the moment where you need to now recenter and say, okay, what is it that I'm doing? Where does my empowerment lie? And how can I make an impact for those who are different than me? Because that's where you can actually make real measured change by being able to communicate across the differences and build other people up. And that was kind of when I reached that point in my financial situation changed. It certainly made it a lot easier than to say, okay, well, who else out here? Who needs help? Let's go.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, there's moments where you move up and down that kind of hierarchy of needs, right? And in order for us to actually hit that self-actualization tip top and truly live into our purpose, we have to have had to kind of satisfy some of those other needs that fall in that. And I certainly understand what it's like to then, get knocked down a couple of those pieces as life changes and life happens. And that's where I talk about like adversity being the thing that is often the cause of most of the hard things in our lives. And it's usually about a change. It's a change in one of those statuses. And interestingly, though, change being a cause of adversity and having to figure that out is also part of the solution when you're looking at how do you, continue to be in your purpose. I love what you said too, Ashley, about the whole person, being your whole person kind of from the very beginning. So important. And it's such a massive difference when the whole person shows up in life because it enables you to be exactly who you're meant to be. And I think that our community has come a long way in the space of being. I mean, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and those were scary times for LGBTQ people. You couldn't be. I mean, we were, but you certainly couldn't be in the ways that our community are out there
Yeah,
today.
come on now, we're almost the same age, right?
Well, I know we didn't talk about ages.
I already told you that I have a 20-year-old, okay? That could give
Yeah.
away a lot of like okay.
I'm bad at math. Okay, that's why I never worked.
Okay.
That's why I never worked in banking, Ashley.
I had a really interesting conversation about age empowerment recently, and it's
Mm,
so interesting when you think about it. It's the ultimate equity item across all the differences because
yes.
we all experience that one exactly the same, just age. I mean, obviously, it gets exacerbated when you start thinking about the other differences and how we all have different things that happen to us based on how old we are, but just age on its own without any other factors. we all experience it exactly the same. Just all depends on how we take care of ourselves. And unless somebody on this webinar or somebody on the recording knows how to stop age from happening, please
Yeah,
share.
let us know. I mean, that you will have found the fountain of youth that everyone
Yes,
keeps
that
talking
part.
about. Let's talk about how you evolved in your journey. Part of your journey, as you said, the whole person showed up at that first time at the bank. But a big part of the rest of your transition journey happened in a way more public way. And as I was learning more about you, having done many things in your career in corporate life, but also as an activist, running for office, and some other things. Share a little bit about the journey that you've taken around um, transitioning, becoming you, and how those elements have weighed emotionally and spiritually and mentally, physically. Because there's a whole lot of dynamics that, as we're talking about age being the common one, all these other components are really different for people. I'd love to learn more about that journey,
Yeah.
particularly because it was so public for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that transitioning, right, is very much hot in the topic of the world right now. I mean, just imagine if um, like the president of the United States of America decided he was going to spend $200 million to do a smear campaign against everybody named Nate. Right? Like,
Let's not talk about that.
so,
I mean, but we have to talk about that
right.
because
But I
that's
mean,
exactly
but
what's
just
happening.
yeah, I mean, think about that. You would be like, should I want to change my name? Right?
Right.
I don't want to be associated with this kind of madness out there. And that's kind of what that was. I mean, at least over the last year, that's what that's been like. But I would say kind of going back in time a little bit further, it really honestly wasn't a big deal in the grand scheme of things. I mean, and the reason it wasn't me being trans wasn't a big deal was because I was always constantly focused on delivering return on investment.
Mm,
So every time I asked for sponsorship dollars from the organization I was working at, or every time I wanted to do something in the community or wanted to march they wanted me to march, they wanted to march me in the Pride Parade. It was actually more reverse, but whatever. I would go to wherever they wanted me to go because we could immediately track an ROI. We knew how many people signed up, how many people filled out an application, we knew, I mean, like all of these things we were tracking, how many engagements, how many impressions, how many hits. There's a reason when anything says the word trans in it online, it's gonna get like, I want to say it's like 100 times more, more views and impressions
mm.
than any other post about something else. And this is kind of like that world that we're living in. So it's like, take advantage of that. Why wouldn't you want to talk about who you are and your identity group? But almost then now it's turned into where like people are like hunting my community in many ways. And it's almost gotten to a point where it's a lot, in my opinion, it's a lot scarier now than it was 15, 16, 17 years ago. So I don't know, there's a lot of emotion in my in my answer here because it's just, it's actively unfolding in the now.
Yeah, it's just reminding me a little bit about the work that I do with clients, my coaching clients, and sometimes corporate people. And when we talk about well-being specifically around each of the batteries of your battery pack to well-being. And there's these four dimensions: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual batteries that are constantly charging up and recharging or depleting. I can only
Right.
imagine that some of what you've just described sounds like a depletion of some of that emotional well-being, and the charge that is part of that. And in addition, how do you charge back up your emotional well-being battery when you're in this constant battle and fight?
I go
What
to
are some?
Thailand. Okay, that's where I go for my battery recharge.
Yeah.
It's my haven. I know that like I'm gonna be so respected there, and that everybody is so amazing, and I get that sense, and it really actually recharged me for a while, a long while, until I go back again.
I often advocate, when we are clear about our purpose, and we're talking again about that self-actualization pyramid, when you're actually in the work that you're meant to be doing, advocacy or activism, or you've hit the stride of the things that you're advocating for children, or you're advocating for trans, people in our community, whatever that purpose is for an individual, when you're working in the purpose, that's a big part of your spiritual battery, and being purposeful and mindful about working in your purpose, at least across the spaces that I work with, and coaches, clients that I coach, um, that can be a supercharger that keeps your physical well-being, your mental, and your spiritual, and your excuse me, your emotional batteries supercharging, and enables us to kind of balance out the times where our batteries get
Yeah,
depleted. Yeah, it's not
definitely.
easy,
Well, I
for
know
sure.
I have a question for you.
Okay, go for
Yeah,
it.
can you tell us what the REAL stands for? REAL?
Oh, there, thank you. Awesome
No,
question. Yeah. So
REEL? No, no, not
yeah,
that
well,
kind of
I
real.
I started out with this book maybe titled something around like authentic realness is kind of where the original title started to come from, because I was like, our people in our community often talk about keeping it real, being
Yes.
real, like let's
Wait,
have
yes,
some
Queen. Like
real
something
talk,
like that.
and all of those kinds of um, ways that we command attention. And as I was talking it out, it's been a lot of time studying resilience. I feel like a lot of LGBTQ people have very resilient lives because the adversities, the number of adversities that we face, the number of cycles that we go through as we were saying before, constantly coming out and constantly having to prove who we are and be authentic. And you talked about that in very ROI kind of terms, having to like almost equate yourself to like,
Right?
there's an ROI with me, like that takes a toll. And so for me, as I was starting to like really fabricate the ways that, because people would ask me, how do you, I've lived through 9/11 and went through some major disasters in Japan with the March of 2011 earthquake and tsunami and the nuclear disasters. And, I've run marathons, and I've kind of been this endurance person who's gone through a lot of crap. And people always ask me, like, how do you do all of that? And what makes you so resilient? And I started to think, like, what are the key components? Ultimately, to answer the question, those four key components that resilient people do, and they do really well, as they face reality. That's the R. And when you are in and understanding the reality curve and you know how to ride it, you're going to be more resilient. The second thing is energy. We were just talking about energy, this that well-being pack. Understanding how you manage those four batteries, what supercharges you and what drains you, is a major part of being resilient. And resilient people know how to manage their energy really, really well. The third part is what we were just talking about being authentic, understanding who you are from the outside in and the inside out, and understanding what your core values are, and understanding your beliefs and your purpose. That's the A, is authenticity. And it counts in a huge way. If you don't count it, then it's really hard to like show up, as you said. And you had to kind of face those things as you started coming out into the bank and starting day one, right? Being who you are. The last part people often like write off. And the L in the real model stands for love. And there is not enough of this being talked about right now in our community, um, deeper in the ways that I talk about it. The components of love in the way that I talk about and really in developing resilience comes from forgiving ourselves and knowing how to forgive others. It is a big part of creating community. When you have numbers and volume, you can do a whole lot of things together. And that is a shared love of purpose or activism or political cause. And also, love includes how we talk, the language we use. And if you're talking in ways that gives yourself self-love and the, positive kind of affirmation around the way you talk about yourself and your community and your friends and your family, that's going to perpetuate a positive outcome towards that well-being and joy I was talking about. And the
100%.
last part of resilience, and those who get the love part really right, and I love the fact that you even cracked up earlier, is humor. Humor, I mean, you've got to laugh. You ran for political office,
This
Ashley.
crap is so hard.
You got to laugh
Have,
at times, right?
have to.
And humor is a big part of that love component. So that's the REAL is reality, energy management, authenticity, and love. And those four things are what really authentically resilient people do to get
Yeah.
through life's hard stuff.
I almost think that like, this connection and the fact that you left us off at love, it almost seems like a really great time to talk more about the challenges facing our youth.
Let's go there.
Because
What do you think are the key challenges or the most urgent risks that are facing the young people in our community?
yeah, I mean, let's go right to the biggest hot button topic. I mean, literally just last week, the Supreme Court ruled that trans kids can't get the healthcare access they need. I mean, I mean, as a mom, like I'm just thinking about this, and I'm like absolutely devastated that like politicians and people elected and appointed into judicial office seem to think that like they know how to parent, take care of their own kids, and love their own kids more than their own parents is absolutely mind-blowing to me. And I think it's really important that you're on this webinar right now and maybe you break down some misnomers about gender affirming care. Let's
Hmm.
just think about this from a holistic standpoint of every single person watching right now does some sort of gender affirming care. So let's just blow that whole thing out of the water right now. You do your hair, you did some Botox, you take a blue pill. I mean, like literally, you start doing, you spray tan, you go to get a tan. I mean, you do anything to make yourself look and feel better and love yourself more. Guess what you're doing? Gender affirming care. You get a haircut, you get your hair dyed, I mean, and the list goes on and on. Maybe you got a little bit of lipo, maybe you're taking the Ozempic. All of these things are gender affirming care. So if you're going to sit here and tell me that you don't think people should have access to gender affirming care in a certain categorization of the world, right? Maybe it's a 17, maybe it's a 16, maybe it's a 15-year-old. But at the end of the day, that same 15, 14, or 13-year-old could be married off if you want to marry off your kid, you can do that in parts of the country.
Yeah.
This is absolutely mind-blowing. Okay. And then the other misnomer that I really have to blow up on this whole gender affirming care issue, because this is the big issue and it causes a cataclysmic issue because this is why mortality rates are so high for the transgender community. Okay, like the average life expectancy for a trans person is like 42 or 43. Now, thank
Mhm.
goodness I've already surpassed that, but that doesn't give me a whole lot of hope in this world. And I can also tell you that for trans women of color, it's way lower. And that's
Mhm.
because of all the stigma and the violence that they face so much more than what I face. So it's really important. And then so the other part that I was getting at, sorry, I'm like on such a long monologue, but I feel
No,
like
keep
this is so
going. Yeah.
important. Is that out of all of it's like I want to say like 99% of all gender affirming care surgeries because this is the big thing everybody's oh they're doing surgery kid goes to school and then comes home and goes to Sam and is back to Sally. This is not happening but nonetheless you heard it's happening, so let's talk about this. And if you did hear it's happening, let's you as an ally need to break down that barrier, and you need to break down that and make sure that they know that that's not really happening. 90%, 99%, I think it is, of all gender affirming care surgeries are actually done by non-LGBTQ people to their kids when they're born, and we call that today intersex. Okay, this is where any kind of medical procedure is being done on a kid that is gender affirming care is when they actually decide to choose one gender or another for raising their kid. and then they choose not to raise them as gender X. And this is why gender X passports and gender X identity documents are so important because then you don't have to make the wrong choice. Imagine as a parent if you made that choice and then the kid is you realize that you didn't maybe choose right. Like, oh my God, imagine what that would feel like. So there's actually more intersex people born than transgender people born. It's pretty close percentage. It's about a little less than 1% of the population. And so this is already part of our world. It's been a part of our world. And then all the other gender affirming care that maybe you're hearing or people are saying, oh, I don't want that to happen, is actually really counseling therapy and then potentially hormone replacement therapy, which is
Mm.
completely reversible. So it's really important that you get the facts. And hormone replacement therapy is usually for young minors. It's more about actually blocking and allowing them to get to be 18 so that way they can make the decision themselves around how they want to showcase their gender in their world.
You bring up some amazing and very important points about gender affirming care for the trans community for sure, and denying young people that kind of care it is kind of mind blowing. I also think like we talk about gender affirming care for cis people too, men who go to get prostate exams and women who are constantly reminded to do breast health checks. Like that's gender affirming care too,
Mhm.
which is really about enabling a whole health system for us to take care of ourselves, no matter um, our genders and the identity pieces. To me, I think that, and the physical parts, however those may shift over a transition, are still equally important to be thinking about and caring about. Maybe I got that wrong, Ashley, but I hear your point 100% around the gender affirming care. I think for me, if I were to spin that question slightly, the I would also talk about healthcare, but in terms of mental health care. I think that's a thing that is absolutely facing our youth, and we need urgent attention to more than ever. And I think COVID did a number on young people. And the lack of socialization and the homeschooling and all of the elements that forced people to kind of go into spaces that may not have always been safe or psychologically safe, or particularly for LGBTQ people and LGBTQ people who couldn't get out of their homes during COVID, and young people who were, figuring out who they were during those periods of times. The question and the understanding of identity and authentic self and understanding, how to be self-aware. Those things were really limited. And I think we're seeing folks come of age now, and people coming out earlier in age, we talked about age before, as also needing more support in that mental health care space. And so I would bundle what you're talking about with mental health support as well, because I think we're not talking about that enough. I lived in Asia for nearly 20 years, where talking about mental health was a taboo. Talking about LGBTQ matters was a taboo. We barely started to crack the code on gender equality and being able to talk about the differences between men and women, let alone LGBTQ people or trans people. And so
Right.
we have to continue to bust open the taboo topics. And I still think that there's a lot of stigma related to mental health, and talking about mental health and open therapy, and talking about having coaches or psychology people surrounding us, or mental health counselors or grief counselors. We need to normalize that part, particularly for young people as they come through and come of age. So I balance out what you're saying, I think, from well, again, going back to that whole person and whole care person. I think those things go together. And the discussion of eliminating the 988 suicide crisis line,
Oh
and
gosh.
not giving access to trans people or gay people, LGBTQ community members, like that's beyond my like imagination, and we need to be continuing to be in that space.
Yeah.
All right, should we switch gears a little bit? I mean, we're kind of talking across the rainbow, so to
I love
speak,
it.
of topics. Where do you see signs of hope and momentum for our community that inspire you?
I think that I see so many resilient young people. I go to the I go sometimes show up at a P Flag chapter meeting or go to a lot of pride events and see kids there. I think is amazing. I also have to give shout outs right to the parents that are very vocal for their kids. It gives me a lot of hope too. And you have free mom hugs, right? I've
Yeah.
given a few of those my time. Uh, but I really love to be able to see them still living their lives out there, knowing how much there is against them. So I don't know. It's very emotional.
Yeah, I see glimmers of hope in that. We're just talking about young people. They still need that mental health support in my observation, particularly around how they socialize and being good, better conversationalists, for example. I don't know. Um, but also, how do we help enable the young people? And my brain just exploded. I have to say I lost my idea there. Um, let me backtrack though and say, when we look at the inspiration, that's where we were talking about. I'm encouraged by their openness. And think that from my limited observation that there's more activism around this space. So I'm hopeful that those of us who helped break down some of the barriers and those who came before us who really enabled Stonewall. I live right here in Washington, D.C., where we had some
World Pride this year.
World Pride was here, but also was a major birthplace for some of the political and policy changes
Yeah,
that were always part of the Stonewall movement that happened, with the riots and the fighting that started our movement in New York. And so it
first
is,
Pride was a riot.
if first Pride was a fight, and a riot. I know there's a play on punny words there, but
Yes.
yeah,
There was another punny word I saw also earlier in your question, especially as it relates to inspire. And I just wanted to touch on this really quickly too, so inspiration is usually found from someone or something. And there's usually a message, right? You
mm,
see someone, you get the message and you receive it. So I actually, in my framework of empowering differences,
yeah.
we have 10 empowering actions and 10 empowering differences as humans, and how we use them and how we leverage them obviously impact other people. And so one of the actions actually in my framework is inspire. And inspire is actually the communication action that teaches
Uh,
you empowering communication of how to connect with people in these ways, in these spaces, through your words, through your emotions, through the way that you look at them, through the way you smile, through the way that everything that you do, it has a way of impacting other people, and then hopefully driving some inspiration to them.
Oh, inspiration. I love that too. And we're talking about communication. I think that's
Mhm.
big part of what I hope to see young people continue to do is they inspire me because they're more out and they're out younger and they're talking about activism and advocacy a lot sooner. Hopefully that inspires more change and continues the movement that we have to continue to fight for every day.
Definitely.
There is a question here in the chat, actually. Behind the scenes, I want to throw this out for our discussion. It's what is the biggest fear, regardless of generation, why people are not self-identifying and being fearful of fully disclosing in the workplace, especially since companies are now, particularly in America, are in this strange place of continuing to promote DEI and or shuttering some of their principles around DEI. What's your take on that?
I mean, I would say that self-ID is such a personal choice. I mean, um, I have a lot of privilege in the way I look and the way I dress and the way I carry myself. If I had a voice changer, I probably could completely shadow in society, especially if I wore
Mm,
flats every day. And so with that great amount of hair privilege, I mean, I have a lot of privileges in the trans community, and that I don't take that lightly. Uh, but I think about people who are beginning transition and what that's like, and then do you want to tell people, or if you transition and you have all of those things, do you want to tell people that you're trans? Do you want I mean,
mm,
it's a very double-ended, emotionally charged idea of identification. And are you going to be supported? Like, there's so many questions you have to ask yourself, and then you have to investigate where you work, and where you live, and who your
mm.
family members are, and who your friends are. Because, I mean, obviously, like I lost friends. Now, granted, that means that those people really were never my friend.
Right.
It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out. But I also lost family members, and then it's like, oh my God, like really? Like, is that going to be, now some of them have come back, right? And they were like, oh wow, she was really successful. Oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
So I think the identification thing is very much into each person's decision, and there's a lot of factors into whether you choose to do that or not. But if you're representing a corporation, then that means you need to investigate in essence to see how people would feel if they identify. And it can't just be how you feel. You have to ask these kinds of questions to figure it out. And it's not easy because many of those questions are going to be those borderline questions that potentially can get you in trouble. So
Yeah.
it's a very careful space.
It is a careful space. And I think the biggest fear for me, and I'm going to go back 20 years, it's interesting, right? Over the course of my life, we've seen such a movement and shift in the way LGBTQ has been represented, and what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable and what was isn't now, and how we spoke then isn't how we speak now, and all of those things. But for me, I have a very interesting principle in my book, and it's the no matter the closet, open the door. And when you open the door, because we all have closets, and today's context of what we're talking about is the LGBTQ closet and opening that door. We all have a lot of closets that we have to open, and sometimes that's an addiction, or that's an eating problem, or that is a family skeleton, or something else. The idea is that true authenticity and the understanding of who you are from the inside out enables you to, and the power that comes from that enables you to open the door no matter what that closet is. But I'm going to talk about the literal closet for me in this question, which was the biggest fear around coming in or out at work, and identifying who and how I identify as a person at work. When I worked in professional sports, and this was 25 years ago or so, there were not any out people, LGBTQ people in professional sports, in the sport that I was working. And there probably were gay people that were there, but they weren't out. And certainly there were no role models for me to come out. And so as you were talking, Ashley, about the greatest fear is losing people, losing loved ones, losing family, losing friends. I was afraid of all those things. And I had variations of advice going into that job. I'd come from the fashion industry where I was out as you could possibly be, wearing wild outfits and doing all kinds of fun things around Fashion Week in New York. But I went into sports where it was almost one of those taboos where we weren't talking. Now, that's 25 years ago. That's not that long ago, but there
Yeah.
were no role models. So, in addition to the fears that I had experienced the first time coming out, which are the ones that you were very aptly talking about, losing friends and family, and the fear that is related to that. The fear for me was I'm going to lose my job. Now that if you go back in time to the 60s and 70s when the birthplace of Stonewall, that was actually a reality. You could get fired. There were no protections for LGBTQ people. It was not a protected class. There's still challenges with the way the law is written and interpreted in this country. But for me, the biggest fear was I, I can't afford to lose my job or lose my career or lose the trajectory that I think I'm on. And, I'm enjoying what I'm doing for my professional work. What happens if? And that fear, the fear of the unknown. And what I know now is that actually that workplace is actually all about diversity in all of the ways that we mean diversity, and is very inclusive to LGBTQ people today. But at the time, that was it was not a thing that we talked about. There weren't affinity groups. They weren't LGBTQ workplace groups in those days. They might have been burgeoning and starting to evolve, but for us and for me, the biggest fear was complete loss of my work identity. And for me at that time of my life, my work identity was my identity. And I think that's another issue for many people generally is I talk about purpose. Our purpose is really the North Star, the guiding star. And if you're, in the Southern Hemisphere, maybe it's the Southern Cross, versus the North Star. But we're talking to a global audience here. But that guiding point is what you want to achieve and what your legacy and what your meaningful life is. And for me, I didn't want to lose sight of that. And at the time, my job was who I was and was part of that. So for me, it was an ultimate sacrifice to, again, lose that, even though I knew who I was and I had experienced that once before. The cost of that was extremely scary. And I think today that similar to answer the second part of the question is, not wanting to fully disclose in today's current climate where there's mixed reactions to how companies who were very supportive of DEI practices are maybe pulling back. Well, what do you do then? What do you do if you're already out? Do you continue to activate, or if you're not out, do you continue to stay closeted? And I think that takes a mental health toll. And this is what I talk about, with mental health crisis is those people who haven't come all the way through that journey. And I think that's a challenge for people. But I appreciate that question. It's a big one. And I agree with you, Ashley. Like it's also such a personal choice. I argue that if though you know who you are from the inside out and you've done that work and you're keeping it real and you use the real model and you use these tools that we're talking about today, that you can actually be exactly who you need to be at the workplace. And there is actually not a whole lot to fear. Because if that workplace is one that is not going to be the right is not going to support in those places, it might not be the right workplace. And I
Yeah.
agree, there's privilege in saying that you can just jump to another job. Not everyone has that privilege either. But I do think that it's about being really in tune to who you are and enabling that to be a life force for propelling your life forward and propelling yourself to joy and to well-being. You only
Yeah.
get one shot at it. And as we said at the beginning, and I'm going to go back to the age comment, nobody knows. That's the great mystery of life. Nobody knows how long we get. Nobody
Yeah.
knows how many days or how many years we get. So the goal is to live uh, fully as much of those days and years as you possibly can. And in that regard, it is equitable because we all get to be alive. What's inequitable is not knowing when it all comes to an end. And I think it's about how we embrace each one of the minutes of every day and every year that enables us to really get to well-being and joy.
Hmm.
Sorry, that was my time to be monologuing, but I like the question that was behind that. As we kind of wrap up, um, I'm thinking about, I mean, we didn't even get to talk about intersectionality and all kinds of things, but for queer professionals and allies who might be listening, what is one piece of advice you'd give them to create impact?
Well, I really love using the four empowerment steps
Okay, go
that
for it.
I guide people on every day in my practice. and through my book, which is basically totally based on the four steps, empowering differences. Step one is to know yourself. And as you're knowing yourself, there's actually a 21 question self-assessment questionnaire that comes with the book. You can actually also just download the self-assessment if you want. If you go to empoweringdifferences.com, and then you click the self-assessment tab, you can actually download it right there. And because I want to be able to give people the access to ask themselves these questions, because I think that that's where you can make a lasting impact when you're ready to really understand where you exist in this space. Step two is to know others. This is, of course, why you're here today, right? You're here to learn about other people who've
That's
been
right.
navigating their LGBTQ world in the workplaces for a while, and hopefully that helps you. But you also need to open the sphere a heck of a lot more and get to know all different types of people. And then step three is to develop your strategy, and how we develop our strategy always is impacted by knowing where you exist in relation to empowerment for each of your 10 differences. And so we have a survey site that we provide all of our clients, and it measures your level of empowerment, and then you get the recommendations for step four, which of course is what we call empowering actions. And so just like if you think about gender empowerment, right, as a specific leadership actions that you should do to drive gender empowerment for yourself and others. And of course, that's like inclusion and educate are your top actions for that. Well, if you were going to drive empowerment for someone's social economic class, then that's going to look a little differently. Okay, it's going to look more like like access, and then invest. Okay, those are going to be your top actions for social economic class empowerment. And each of the 10 differences have different actions that you should focus on. And that's why you want to make sure that you spend time so you're doing the thing that's going to actually get people more empowerment faster, and it's going to get you on your goal of where you want to go.
Empowering action. That really resonates with me because it enables us to kind of do that, to take that inner work that
Mhm.
I talk about and then do something with it, which is go take action. I love the fact that the way you're describing that, it is there's a perpetuation of energy that continues when you're empowering in that way.
Yeah, almost think of it like a yin and yang kind of scenario, right? Because empowerment is always happening. And it's
Mm.
just a matter, like, so if you're Jeffy B, you're taking a heck of a lot more empowerment. If you're ketamine guy, you're taking a lot of empowerment from people. But, so there's a world, and then we have to kind of see some of that back as individuals in this world.
Balance is what is part of this last question that has come in here that they're asking around. I think balance is part of the answer generally for life. But what are some of the ways to remain positive concerning the political climate? And I recommend strongly to the people that I work with. I talk about the trifecta of self-love. And this trifecta of self-love is one of the ways to not only empower, taking empowering action, speaking about that, and finding balance. Um, but it is really about these three key components, which is about self-care. And we talked a little bit about self-care and some of the ways that we do self-care through gender affirming self-care action. That's a big part of it. We the second part is really about of the trifecta is about self-compassion. And I think LGBTQ people probably know a lot about this because we get stuck often in how we feel about how we're showing up. And it's a practice. We often actually give compassion out to others better than we actually give to ourselves. We're actually harder on ourselves. But I think
100%.
LGBTQ people sometimes understand this notion in ways that is useful. But I think the third part of this trifecta of self-love is what I call self-advocacy. And to me, that rounds this and takes us back to this empowering action is when you know that you've got empowerment kind of happening and you can turn that on for yourself and say, hey, I'm taking a mental health day today, or I'm not doing that because that is a boundary for me. Or,
Yeah.
hey, boss, not acceptable to use that language in the office. Or, hey, my pronouns are he, him. That self-advocacy and standing up in a way that enables you to balance self-care and self-compassion is a core ingredient to enabling you to get to well-being and joy in my
Yeah.
practice and with my clients. So I think the balance of those three plus what you're talking, like we're talking about balance. And I think that's might be for me, that's the advice I give as well as we kind of round out our discussion today is for those queer professionals who are out there and allies of our community, help create balance, help create that trifecta and empowering action for the people that you work with, the people that you are supporting or allies of, and if it's you, be in a practice.
Yeah.
It's helpful to go to Thailand, as you mentioned, because those jumpstart and can recharge the batteries. But just like, Pride Month is 30 days, self-care and the trifecta of self-love is every day. Um, Pride for gay people, for LGBTQ people, trans people is every day. It's about showing up and
Yeah.
achieving that balance and enabling us to really continue to be who we are each and every day. So
Yeah.
that's how I would say it. But any final thoughts or parting
Yeah, I
words
mean,
from you,
really,
Ashley?
yeah, really fast. I would just obviously the I know a whole lot about the political climate. I mean, as you mentioned, I did win an election last year in Florida, of all places, and and
Hmm.
so I would say, well, I actually wrote about this in my book. Actually, chapter 8 is on political differences,
Ooh.
because while it's not directly one of the differences, it is one of the differences. It's one of your attributes, how you decide to vote, is part of who you are as a person. And it obviously impacts how you live the world and how we all live the United States of America right now. It's kind of, we're kind of all over the place. I think it's really hard to be political, be neutrality in this way. But you have to be respectful and listen and learn. Ask
Mm,
somebody
mm,
exactly why they vote the way that they vote, whether that be on this side or that side. Ask them and say, hey, what's the reason? And find out. And then that way you can learn what to look for. And you get to know your friend, and you get to understand this concept a little bit more. And I think it's going to help you to be more grounded. And the more listening that you do in this space, you will uncover so much more that you need to learn. I mean, I personally knocked on like 3,500 doors in the span of just a few weeks. My team knocked on 9,000 doors total in our election.
wow,
And
that's
so,
incredible.
just be thinking about what it's like. And when you go and have conversations with people who immediately, based on what they hear in the news, don't want to even speak to you, but yet you continue to ask them why they feel that way, then you
Mm,
can actually get to the real issue. What is the real issue? What are you being told about somebody or someone's position? And then you can actually learn the issue, and then you can communicate towards that issue. And this will put you in a much better space, regardless of whatever your political affiliation is.
listening and learning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God,
So yeah, that's
we
fun
need way
stuff.
more of that. I mean,
More of that,
it's
less
so,
ketamine guy,
yeah.
more listening.
Yeah, I mean, it's so simple when you say it that way. It's like, if only, right?
Yeah, I
Which
do
is
have another resource too. We last year we published these really awesome empowerment conversation cards,
amazing.
which are really helpful in this space. So if you haven't gotten any of these, definitely you should totally do that.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to open it up for additional questions. We
Oh
have
yay, look at us.
additional time, so
We're in overtime now. This is great.
yeah, we've kind of hit the mark, which is great, but there's a space here for any additional questions. There's one question here for you, Ashley, which is how does empowerment go wrong,
Oh.
especially in this divisive political climate?
Well, I kind of went on the political rant, so I'm going to skip that part of the
Okay,
question.
fair enough. But
Um,
tell us a little bit more about like when empowerment goes upside down.
Yeah. I have a really good example of this concept and so a lot of people can hold on to too much empowerment. And, I may have mentioned a couple of their names earlier when I was talking about random people who might have the most money in the entire world. That's a perfect example. But I would also tell you another example of this is an interesting one. If anyone has the Netflix, maybe you watch Inventing Anna on Netflix.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. Anna Delvey is a really great example of empowerment gone wrong because now you can't argue the fact that this woman was really freaking empowered and the fact that she got banks to write her checks with no proof.
Millions of dollars. Yeah, I
Right?
know.
No proof, no nothing. I mean, how empowered are you in that scenario when you literally get people to be writing you checks without any factual information backing you up? I mean, this is like total empowerment, like way through the roof empowerment. Now, the interesting thing is that she would have never been arrested or gone to jail had she actually filed the 501(c)(3) paperwork for her Hannah Delvey Foundation.
Right.
And had she done that, she would have been able to hide behind the nonprofit organization and say that, oh, the nonprofit failed. No, it happens all the time. And it's just interesting. So that meant that she would have had to actually do the things to connect empowerment to people. And literally, that's what empowerment is about. It's about connecting it to people. So it's authority and power connected to people. This is the genesis, in essence, or
Mm,
the summary of the definition of empowerment. So authority is that emotional part, the real part of like how you connect with these elements. And then my organization, we look at power as something that's tangible and metric that you can track. Because like, for example, if you are watching us, you have power on your laptop or your phone or wherever it is, you have power and it's being tracked, right? There's a percentage thing down in the corner over here, right? And it tells you exactly how much percent you have left, or if you're on your phone, then it's up here somewhere, right? And you always know you're always measured and judged. Same thing with age, right? You're always measured equally. And these are power items. So when I said that I was one of the top three revenue producers for the bank I was working for in the sales capacity, there's a reason I share that. And I generated millions and millions of dollars in new business revenue every year because all of that is tracked very easily. No one can argue that away. They can't argue your DEI budget away when you're literally showing them the money. Be the ambassador of Kwan for them, okay?
mm.
And in that state, in that moment, now you know that the authority is all the emotions of empowerment. It's the feeling you get from being the boss. And then power is the actual sticking items and so authority and power connected to people. If you don't have all three, and if you're not connecting it, then I can guarantee you eventually you're going to have an Anna Delvey problem, or you're going to have a Academy Man problem, or a Jeffy B problem. One of those problems are going to exist eventually if you keep on not connecting your empowerment to people.
I feel like I just had a master class here in in what that combination actually brings. Thank you. I've learned something. I hadn't thought about the combination of what empowerment can be, and I appreciate that a lot. I was thinking about what you said about batteries and having power. It reminds me, I'm gonna skip over and jump back to kind of um, the piece around battery charging. The whole idea around self-care is the same concept. It's not optional. Like if your battery like goes down on your phone, or on your computer, what's the first thing everyone does is they
Low power warning. You get
they
the warning.
panic. Yeah, I call that the red zone. And if you get into the red zone and your battery's like in the red zone, what like people are like FOMO and like, what am I
You
gonna
go to
do?
power save. Power save, okay?
Yeah, But the crazy thing that is hard for us to imagine, and it is, we don't think of ourselves as running on the same kind of battery packs. And so you want to have empowerment, you want to take action and drive and enable yourself. Well, guess what? If all your batteries are in the red zone, your physical battery, your emotional, mental, and spiritual batteries are all in the red zone, you ain't gonna be able to do diddly. Like I often say, you'll appreciate this because it has nothing to do with finance or banking, but I'm like, you gotta charge up the well-being tank if you're gonna make it to the bank. Okay.
Yes.
And I've said this for a long time. All those batteries in your life have got to enable you to fully charge. You want to be an advocate, you want to be an activist, you want to get out there and be empowered. Well, you got to make sure you're taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
And if you're
I'm a big
not,
believer in naps also, by the way.
heck yeah, that's
I can
self-care
nap for like
101.
5 minutes or 25 minutes, and then boom, I can just go the whole entire night if I need to. Okay.
100%. And we practice in many of the companies I've worked at mindful moments.
Yeah.
And even a mindful moment, even a 1 minute mindful moment between meetings, as you go off one Zoom to another Zoom, or you're in between, like those can help power pack and charge you back up so that you're ready to be that activist and that advocate. One of the questions here that's come through is around how do we move from self-advocacy into being an activist or an advocate for others? It starts with yourself first. You can't do anything until you're able to take care of yourself. You hear it all the time on the airlines, right? In case of emergency, an oxygen mask will drop down. Please, put on your own mask before assisting others. Ding, ding, ding. I mean, they got it right, in this space. Like, in order for you to become a well-being activist or a person who wants to lead LGBTQ, ERG, or affinity groups at work or, in the community, or to go out there and protest, there's lots of different ways to be an activist.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's
Knock doors, actually. Knock doors. You want to do,
knock
actually.
doors, write policies. Like if you want to do any of that, you've
Yeah.
got to charge yourself up. And it starts with that trifecta of self-love. And without that, you're going to not be able to do all the things that you want to do. I ask you that, Ashley, like if you weren't able to take care of yourself and power pack charge yourself up, would you be as effective in your own empowerment?
I'd just be probably faking it.
Right.
That's
And
fair.
to my point that I talk about in
Yeah.
my book is, and by the way, this is what my book looks like again, your real life. I talk about you can't fake it till you make it. It's impossible. And the
Yeah.
reason is that the physiological part of our body and the neurophysiology of our body embeds all the actual things that happen in our lives. Your body and your brain cannot forget all of the experiences that it has. Those things live in your body. So if you're trying to fake it until you make it, won't work because your body and your brain know better. So I often advocate that the best way for anyone to become an activist and to move into spaces of well-being or self-care or care for others in the workplace or being an activist in the world is to ensure that you get to know who you are first so that you
Yes.
know when your batteries are down
Step one.
and you know what to do to charge them back up.
Yeah.
That's the number one thing. And you talked about that also when you started working at the bank all those many years ago as you being you, showing up as you first. It's about
Yes.
self-awareness. And that is a big part of being able to be a powerful advocate or a powerful ally or a powerful activist is you got to know who you are first, knowing a little bit about your purpose, and then knowing what supercharges you to keep your batteries fully charged so you can go out there and give it to others.
Hmm. Yes. The
Amen. Sorry. Sorry.
like, activist. Me.
There we go. I don't know. There's one last question here for our session. Let me look at this and throw it to you, Ashley, which is how about throwing the imposter syndrome excuse away and own up to your own beliefs? What's your thought on imposter syndrome and its role in our work?
It's so interesting. I have a confession to make. Like,
Okay.
I've had a little bit of like imposter
Confession.
syndrome creep in on me a little bit while I've been actively dating in my personal life. And oh my
Okay.
gosh, and I'm like, oh my God, I need to get this away. I need to get away from this. I need to get away from this because it's like, wow, I mean, it's so hard, right, to connect with other humans. And literally my whole work is about connecting humans
Connecting.
together,
Yeah.
helping them better understand each other, help them be better communicators, help them, right, all in this space, help the communities who have no resources, right? I'm like literally, helping people who are homeless, it's kind of like a constant in that way. And so I've kind of had a little bit of this hit me in my personal life, and it's emotional, and I'm like, oh God, I need to get away from this. And it's like I wanted to just run away from that part of my life just because of how it was making me feel. Um, but I know that a lot of people feel that way too, as I've kind of uncovered it. But I think that communication can help you get that away from you and kind of maybe changing the narrative and putting yourself in a different space when you feel that way, maybe surrounding yourself by different people, so obviously if I felt that way, then that meant that I shouldn't be devoting more time to people in that space. And I think that that's how you and try to navigate that. And you can use the resources, right? For real, I think would probably a really great resource,
Thank you.
especially centered around self-love. And then yeah, and same thing. I would also, advocate people use the four empowerment steps too, is a great way to navigate that too.
Thank you for that. I mean, it's so good to hear about more tools and to be able to share more tools with our community. And that's a big part, I would guess, as to why you wrote your book. It is for me, it was really about enabling me to bottle up the ways that I think about resilience and getting through adversity to share that with other people and
Yes.
to really enable people to find ways to what I say in my book is to release the things that don't serve you. And part of imposter syndrome, we need to just talk a little bit about the neuroscience that's behind that is it comes from the part of our brain, our amygdala, which is the small little gland in the back of our brain that keeps us safe. And over the evolution of our lives as humans, this part of our brain is the tripwire that is saying threat or fight or flight or freeze and now fawn, these kind of instinctual things that cause our body and systems of our body to react. And so we have this thing that's called negativity bias. Can't run away from it. And in the past, it's negativity bias and this constant scanning for threats kept us really safe as humans. It's what enabled us to evolve as a species. Today, those threats are really, really different. And so, imposter syndrome and the way that kind of collides in our body and in our brain and the chemistry of the neurons and how they interact with each other makes it quite complicated because it's signaling that it could be a threat. It's in fact something that is not necessarily a threat in the ways of our prehistoric ancestors, but one that we have to be conscious of. So I kind of agree with the question here is, throw away, these things, release them. Recognize that there is a negativity bias that we have. Understand what that looks like for you. Understand the voice of your inner critic, because guess what, everybody? We all have one. And LGBTQ people often have a very loud one that is in constant battle with this negativity bias and causes this imposter to think that they show up. But the signals that you're reading are actually false signals. And so allowing yourself to release those false signals and understand where you really are from the inside out. And the question was about understanding and owning up to your own beliefs. Yes, this is a big part of what the A in authenticity means is get
Mhm.
to know your values and your strengths and your beliefs and your core philosophies. Because when you know that, it's a lot easier to read the false signals and to let go of the imposter syndrome and the negativity bias. So
Yeah.
not easy practice, but when you
Mhm.
start to practice, like you do with playing tennis or putting on your lipstick or whatever it is that you do, you get better at it. And it's about how we take care of ourselves in that way as well. So it's a great last question.
Awesome.
Final thoughts.
Oh my gosh.
Round us out. We got to close up. We're moving
Yes.
over now. Yeah.
I mean, being LGBTQIA plus in the current workplace world, it's not easy, and my final message is for you allies out there that are watching this. You went on the webinar, you came here, that was amazing. I'm so glad that you did that. How many people are going to share this webinar with? Because if you haven't thought about who you're going to share it with yet, then I challenge you to do more as an ally. You need to be challenged. I mean, it was easy for you to click the button here because you probably have already attended LGBTQ things, or you've attended diversity MBA stuff, and you've been a part of their sphere. But in this world right now, I mean, we've talked about some very serious things in this session, and this is your opportunity to really make that call to action by getting at least five people to watch it. And if you're not thinking about who those are, literally just go to the share button and see who the first five people that come up and just do it like that. I mean, don't put too much thought into this thing, okay? Is that important? And I would say that you definitely should buy Nate's book, okay? Because you need to learn about your real life, okay? And you need to use this model because I love that it ends in love.
Well said. I was going to spin it the other way, Ashley, and cross promote your book, Empowering Differences, because it really is about taking action and finding who you are in the core and tools. It is about tools and resources for our community. And this conversation is another tool, lived experiences. And Ashley, you talked about listening earlier. Listening to those who have different lived experiences is also really powerful for all of us to continue to learn, which was the other part of your message in taking empowerment. And if you haven't read Empowering Differences by Ashley Brundage, then you need to get that book too. And as we cross pollinate and promote each other's work, the idea here, folks, is that when you are showing up every day as your real self and your whole self, that you're going to make a difference not only for you, but the people that are around you. And that's your coworkers, that's your friends, that's your family. I want to thank you all for joining us, and a massive thanks to Diversity MBA, Sasha Parrish and Pam McIlvaine for inviting Ashley and I to come and speak on the webinar. It's always a pleasure to be in this community and to be with all the participants that have joined us today and who are going to be listening in the future. So thank you
High
all.
five.
Yeah,
Hollywood Squares high five.
yeah, there's high five right there.
That was an amazing conversation. Thank you guys both so much. Just to all of our listeners, this will be available on YouTube, and we will link both of your books in the description below so that everyone will have access to them. Additionally, Ashley was on the radio show with Pam McIlvaine, our CEO. That will be available starting June 28th, and it will be live on WCPT 820 AM radio in Chicago. Next in the series, if you're interested in our Smart Series Cultural Webinar Series. Next, we'll be doing Being Hispanic in America on October 9th. We hope to see some of you there. And of course, it's that time to start promoting our P&L Group's Future Ready Power Up for Change 19th Annual Virtual Leadership and Recognition Conference, September 16th through the 18th. You can register now. Thank you all so much. Wonderful having you both. And good afternoon, everyone. Bye.
Thank you and happy Pride.